on the defense spending. President Trump has consistently asked for the Europeans to do more. US, NATO allies, so excluding the US, Canada and the EU, paying 20% more. And we have to continue this.
European NATO allies to spend more on defence. And he's also made clear that his priorities for security are facing up to the threat posed by China and defending America's own borders. How confident are you, therefore, that America would come to Europe's aid if European NATO allies came under attack? And could European allies alone defend themselves?
I think my reaction needs to have two elements. First of all, on the defense spending. President Trump has consistently asked for the Europeans to do more. We had a pledge in Wales in 2014, and basically not a lot happened after 2014. And it really started to take off when he was president in post-2016, 2017, and particularly in 2018, 2019, up to today, including the 20% increase, 23 compared to 24. US, NATO allies, so excluding the US, Canada and the EU, paying 20% more. And we have to continue this. The good thing is that what we have in place now is a process based on NATO's defense planning process, which will lead to clarity on what needs to be done to keep us safe, the capability targets. From there we will see where the gaps are. We know already that it probably will be in the area of missile defense, air and missile defense, in the area of logistics, military mobility, long-range weapons, but also to increase the strength of our armies. Yes, the Navy and of course our Air Force, but particularly when it comes to our armies, we'll have to do more, including making sure that they can fight prolonged wars and that they will be more heavily armed, including with tanks. And all this costs money. We are now getting those numbers on the table, and this is the big difference with 2014. There it was, let's do 2%. Now we will have a content-driven debate. How do we fill the gap between where we are and where we have to be? And I expect this to be north of 3%, I said before, but I'm not committing to a number now because we are still at the early stage in exactly coming to the details. And then on Europe and the rest of the world, I think when we discuss this with our American colleagues within NATO, there is a clear joint assessment that what happens in Ukraine or what happens in Europe, and particularly now in Ukraine, is not only Russia, Ukraine, or Russia, Europe. It also involves North Korea, China, Iran. So there is an interconnection now between what happens in the North Atlantic and in the Euro-Atlantic area on the one hand, but also in the Pacific on the other hand. And that means that all these theaters are getting intertwined. And that means from a strategic point of view, we have to make sure that we assess them like this. But I completely understand that the Americans want the Europeans and the Canadians to pay more. And again, back to the first question, we are assessing exactly what needs to be done based on the capability target process.
All right, Ukraine Public Broadcasting.
Thank you. One of the possible points of US peace plan is to postpone Ukraine's accessions for NATO for several years or even decades. What's your position on that? And short of NATO membership, how can NATO allies provide Ukraine security guarantees after possible ceasefire? Thank you.
We have one problem here, and that is that we have democracy, and that means that journalists ask questions to the politicians coming in, to me as Secretary General, and that is great. The big difference, of course, with Moscow is that Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin is not facing this. So he can keep his ideas close to himself. And I do not want him to be wiser than he is already. He is sitting there in that reclining chair, awaiting what I'm going to say here and others will say at NATO. I know two things. One, we have to make sure that Ukraine is in the best possible position whenever talks will start about the future of this conflict. And when we have brought it to a conclusion, that the outcome of that discussion, the peace deal or whatever it will be, has to be durable, enduring, has to be concrete, carved in stone, that he will never ever again try to attack 1 square kilometer or 1 square mile of Ukraine. These two things are for me crucial. And then we can easily brainstorm about the best way forward, including NATO, other countries getting involved, exactly how to do that. But again, it makes him wiser than he should be. This is all part, of course, of future talks within the alliance, and then to a certain extent, probably also with him. But let's not make him wiser than he is already.
DPA, up in the back here.
Thank you. Ansgar Hase, German press agency, DPA. Secretary General, according to new calculations, Russia spent more on the military and armament last year than all European allies combined. Do you consider these calculations credible? And if so, how do you assess these findings? Thank you.
Well, I mean, we can always go through the numbers and then probably hint at 1 or 2 points where they are not correct or overcorrect or whatever. But let's look at the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is that Russia at this moment is spending 40% of its state budget on defense, is spending almost 10% of its national income on defense. And of course you have to have the purchasing power figured in those numbers. I understand that that has been done. So for me it is also confirmation of the fact of what I tried to say in my speech in December, that yes, we are safe now. Our deterrence and defense is strong at this moment. But not in 4 or 5 years, if we do not take some difficult decisions this year about, yes, Ukraine, obviously, but also about defense spending, doing much, much more than the 2% we pledged in Wales, and those not yet on 2%, please get there before summer. But also on production. We have to make sure that we produce enough. And this is a problem not only for the European part of NATO, but also the US part of NATO. Because all of us, from California up to and including Ankara, we are not producing enough. We have to do more. More shifts, more production lines.
Interfax Ukraine.
Yeah. Thank you, Secretary
Hello.
General.
Good afternoon.
Goedemiddag.
Goedemiddag.
Okay. Irina Somber, News Agency, Interfax, Ukraine. Question regarding today Ramstein Group. What is your expectation? What kind of outcome can be from this meeting? Will it die? Will it survive? And if it will survive, what kind of role can play NATO in this?
Well, clearly you need both, because what the Ramstein format, the UDCG, is doing is making sure that allies and other countries outside NATO commit to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs in terms of particularly support with concrete material to fight the war against Russia. And I already mentioned some of the big announcements the last couple of 2 weeks from Canada, Sweden, the Netherlands and France. And no doubt, I hope today, but also the coming days, you will see new announcements coming out. So you need that format. And then you need to set you to make sure that you organize all the aid being delivered into Ukraine in the best possible way, that it has maximum use for you guys in Ukraine to fight the war. Plus, of course, making sure that the training takes place. Because what you need is the defense gear to defend yourself, the tanks and the anti-ballistic missiles, the air defense systems and everything you need to defend yourselves and to fight the war, but also the training. And that is what NSETU is organizing. So we need those two. So I think there's a future for both.